In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war and giant robots. And in this scenario, there will be an even larger robot. You're not thinking big enough. Larger. 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 Yeah!
This thing is the Great Spirit Robot from Bionicle. A 40 million foot tall metal monstrosity that houses its own space-time continuum, an entire world full of sentient, living, thinking beings. And that's not where the twists end, because this robot also has a being controlling it called the Great Spirit Matanui, and it can use its awesome powers of massive gravity waves, one of 16 elemental effects, or its self-repair mechanism to obliterate anything in its way. But in this scenario, the Great Spirit Robot will be encountering the faction called the Necrons, evil Egyptian Terminator mummies that have the power to destroy solar systems with just a touch of their fingers. So join us today in this Bionicle crossover episode as we see the god killers of 40k interact with the god of the Bionicle Universe. In this scenario, the Great Spirit Robot will be appearing in a random Necron-controlled sector of the 40k Milky Way galaxy. Matanui's objective is to observe the cultures on inhabited planets to see how they deal with war in hopes of finding a permanent peaceful solution to conflict. As you might imagine, he came to the wrong galaxy. But this 40 million foot tall monster of a machine isn't just going to take it lying down, because it has a few tricks up its sleeves, or rather its hands, where it uses its primary forms of attack. The first being its gravity beams. Beams so powerful they can destroy planets, and with enough time, even suns, in just a single hit. And they can be scaled, so on the more powerful end they're destroying suns. On the less powerful end, they can merely manipulate celestial objects to anywhere he wants them to go. And these aren't the only beams he can emanate, because he has 15 other elemental powers that he can use in a similar fashion, with some of the more notable ones being plant life, psionic, light, and shadow. He also comes equipped with an extremely advanced self-repair mechanism that can draw destroyed pieces of the GSR back into itself and repair them in short order, so long as it has not taken catastrophic damage. Akin to how a human can reattach their finger in a short amount of time, so long as the human is, not dead, obviously. Except that the GSR's is so powerful, it doesn't have a time limit. If it's near the GSR, it will start to auto-repair automatically. The closer it is, the faster it goes to itself. The main issue for the Necrons is going to be the fact that the shell of the Great Spirit Robot is extremely durable in its own right. Because not only is it made of a material called proto-iron, which is essentially the equivalent to iron, it is also intermixed with another thing called proto-steel, which is more akin to adamantium from Marvel than it is to human-made steel. This makes the outer shell of the robot extremely durable, and the only time it really takes damage in its own story is when we're involving planetary forces. So if the Necrons want any chance of going against this thing toe-to-toe, they're going to need to bring their biggest guns possible. But that might not be necessary, because the GSR is also the home to a variety of sentient species inside of it, and as you might imagine, the inside of the GSR is much less durable than the outside. So if the Necrons manage to get inside the universe, that's where they'll be able to inflict the most damage with the least amount of force. The problem here will be the numerous races of biomechanical beings that inhabit the inside of the GSR, because these species have an innumerable number of absolutely insane abilities and hacks. That's without mentioning the fact that since they are all biomechanical beings, which are mostly mechanical, even the weakest of the sentient species can lift up to a ton of material with, moderate effort, while the strongest is able to destroy entire mountains. However, the average power level of someone in the universe tends to be around building level to large building level. So whether by physical strength or whatever abilities they have been granted, they are able to destroy building-sized objects pretty easily. The inside of the GSR itself is comprised of a series of domes connected by massive waterways, and in each of these domes there are one or many islands, depending on how large the dome is. And all of the domes are artificially lit. So the most common way to travel from island to island and from dome to dome is via boat, although there are some underground places that you can get to through secretive tunnels, although they're extremely hard to find and extremely dangerous in their own right. All of this is compounded by the fact that the Great Spirit Madanui can view what is happening inside of his own body and can affect a great many things, including temperature, gravity, and even the destiny of those inside of it. However, he is not omniscient or omnipotent within himself, and he can be fooled or tricked or hidden from in certain areas. So if the Necrons manage to get inside and either take out his main energy source or his core processor, which is essentially his brain, they will be able to completely disable and destroy the robot. So now that we have their win conditions established, let's move on to what the Necrons bring to the table. The Necrons are essentially a bunch of Egyptian Terminators that rise up out of their tomb worlds to go and destroy any sentient life that they find, because they believe the universe is theirs to rule. And while they have the most advanced technology in the setting, able to fly at massively faster than light speeds without dipping into essentially what is Warhammer hell, they also have access to teleportation gates, disintegration effects, time warping abilities, and pretty much every other random branch of, yeah, I think a sci-fi faction could do that. But to put a limit on their power level, the most powerful artifact they have is called the Celestial Ore, which is a massive holographic live map of the galaxy so they can see what's going on. And if you interact with the map, it will interact with reality. So if you destroy a planet or something, it will blow up that planet in real life. They don't like to use it though because the consequences are kind of unpredictable of mass destruction, so they keep it on lockdown. For other utility, they also have stuff like pocket dimensions or making things bigger on the inside than the outside, that kind of classic stuff. And while that's impressive, it's not exactly outside the realm of Bionicle technology, because there are factions in Bionicle that can do similar things, although not quite on the Necron scale, because they're a galaxy-spanning empire while Bionicle is limited to a fairly small Earth-sized universe. Yet the capabilities of the Necrons are not as interesting as their motivations, because the Necrons are a divided group. All of them think they're better than the other ones, because how Necrons are divided amongst themselves is by dynasties. So they have Tomb Kings who rule a bunch of mindless underlings who all lost their souls when some tragic thing happened in the past. However, the tragic thing happened because they believe a god who was called the Deceiver. He obviously wasn't called that at the time, but they listened to him, and he had everyone go through biotransference, which turned their living, mortal, normal bodies into living, biomechanical bodies, just without the soul, and the gods ate all of their souls. So they were really mad at the gods, and they heckin' blew them up and now use their remnants to power all their technology, hence one of the reasons they're so strong. So these massively powerful singular beings go around beefing with each other because they all have kind of massive egos. And while their motivations are very different from each other, there are a few main ones that would attract them to the Bionicle universe. First is that Bionicles, all the mechanical beings inside the GSR, have souls and are biomechanical. This is compounded by the fact that they have resurrection technology built into the GSR and its floating satellite called the Red Star. And this resurrection technology can take a broken body and completely revive it with its soul intact. So I think the Necrons would be very interested in finding out what makes this technology tick. The second motivation is that they want to just raid some of the random technology of the GSR. So figuring out how masks work, which are one of the main mechanics of species in this universe. Pretty much anyone can wear a mask in the Bionicle universe, and it can grant them an additional ability. So I think the Necrons would be very interested in getting these random additional abilities because there's such a wide variety of them, and some of them are super useful, like the Mask of Strength, or Mask of Speed, or Mask of Shielding, or Mask of Life. Now one of those seems a little more powerful than the others, and that's because there are legendary masks inside the Bionicle universe, and this would be the other main thing the Necrons want. Because these legendary masks, as they're called, actually control some of the fundamental forces in the Bionicle universe, and if they are destroyed, that force in the universe is gone. So the Mask of Life, for example, if it's destroyed, it will kill everything inside the Bionicle universe and presumably a small radius outside of it. The Mask of Time, if it is destroyed, it will destroy the space-time continuum in the Bionicle universe, making all events take place out of sequence and eternally, which sounds like a complete nightmare. Or the Mask of Creation, wielded by the Master Smith Artaka, which allows him to envision anything he can think of, and it will give him step-by-step guides on how to make that thing, which is extremely powerful. But if he knows how to make a thing, he can just use the power of the mask to create it wholesale. which seems ridiculously busted, and it is. So whether the Necrons are seeking their former state as mortal living biological bodies, or if they are looking to get just raw power, the GSR has something for everybody. Unfortunate for the GSR. But with all this laid out, let's get into the real scenario, the meat and bones, and see how these factions fare against each other. It starts off with the Great Spirit Robot flying into Necron space from outside the galactic disk and going to the nearest inhabited planet. Given its own biomechanical preference, it will likely choose a Necron-inhabited planet because it might see them as life, rather than just as soulless robot terminators. The Necron response will depend on what faction interacts with it, but it will most likely be some variation of exploration, followed by potential negotiation. After all, a giant robot that is intelligent and non-hostile is a powerful ally. But Madanui is an extremely moral person, and upon learning of the Necrons' greater goals and casual cruelties, he will depart from them, but they will follow. If he won't join them willingly, they'll just have to loot his corpse. So, the chase will begin, and Madanui's gravity beams and other elemental effects will obliterate any casual fleet sent against him. But it won't last, because faster fleets who can dodge the beams or clever traps and teleportation setups will allow the Necrons to eventually make their way inside the Great Spirit's hull. And as a famous hotshot once said, "This is where the fun begins." The Necrons would begin their march through the domes, searching for a way to disable or destroy the robot. But the Resistance will baffle them. Biomechanical beings who their scientists will figure out are essentially immune to aging, possess souls, and can be brought back to life through unique technology. This would interest them because immune to aging and being able to be resurrected are two things the Necrons can do, but the Bionicles can do it while keeping their souls. They will also discover the awesome powers of masks, which are used by great effect by the world's most common defenders, Toa. 7-foot-tall beings who can each control one of the elements that the GSR can. Obviously, to a lesser extent. They're not blowing up planets with their fire, right? They're just doing that building level, or more depending on how much elemental power they release. But the Necron march will not be stopped, as their weapons will shred through even the toughest of Bionicle's defenders. As the Necrons take more ground, conquering dome after dome, they will find the resistance greatly increasing, as the 4 great factions of Bionicle will recognize the existential threat that is invading. The Toa, the Brotherhood of Makuta, the Dark Hunters, and the Order of Madanui will come to an uneasy but powerful alliance. Destroyed Necron technology will be scavenged and then reverse engineered and then mass-produced in the factories of Zia and Metronui. The Makuta will create Rahi beasts that are resistant to common Necron technology and unleash them in droves. Toa will forego their killing prohibition in light of extinction, and the massive elemental effects they can generate when uninhibited will be able to wipe battalions off the map. And Artaka, with the Mask of Creation on his hidden island, will reveal himself to the universe and create weapons powerful enough to match even the handheld artifacts that the Necrons hold. For Madanui's part, he will increase the number of Toa by changing the destiny of Matoran and transforming them at faster rates. He will impede the Necrons with extreme weather and internal defense mechanisms, and he will pass along information to the defenders about troop positions and capabilities through visions and astrological signs. But his attention is not infinite, and the Necron forces outside will keep sending fleets or attempting to disable him with their super weapons. If he gets too involved on the inside, he risks being destroyed from without. And now, with the fate of this small universe in the balance and both sides increasing in ferocity, the timeline splits into 3 alternate futures. The Necrons are pushed back. Constantly attacked by locals who wielded awesome and unpredictable powers would have been manageable, if they weren't being aided by a deity of immense power. Chronomage's plans were frequently countered by the prophetic knowledge of Madanui. The constant influx of new and destined Toa turned massed armies into little more than easy targets. And to compound their troubles, the shape-shifting and teleporting Makuta harass and sow discord among the Necron leadership. And as time wears on, reverse-engineered Necron technology lessens the technological edge that the Necrons hold, until finally, they must cut their losses and vow to shatter this god another day. The Bionicle inhabitants are left scarred and battered, their numbers heavily reduced, and infighting bound to claim even more over the power vacuums that form from such conflict. But the ideals of unity, duty, and destiny prevail, and not even the powers of the Necrons can break them. The inhabitants of the robot were troublesome, but ultimately impotent. A lucky hit on the GSR allows a swift stream of Necron reinforcements to enter and stage invasions in every single dome simultaneously. With so many battlefronts, the defenders are overwhelmed and scattered before the might of the Necrons like every other inferior race. A few individuals escape into the wider galaxy, but they mean nothing in the grand scheme, so the Necrons loot the body, taking captives, masks, and any technology they don't already possess. So whatever goal the dynasty has, they are now one step closer to it. And as they board their ships and leave the desecrated corpse of Mata Nui, they add another tally to their scoreboard of broken gods. The Necrons are overwhelmed by the power of the Great Spirit Robot. His mobility, intelligence, and power are a potent combo that allows it to avoid traps and destroy most fleets and super weapons before they can get off a devastating blow. Any chip damage is repaired quite quickly, and the invasion forces on the inside are teleporting back to the Tomb Worlds at unsustainable rates. Total Necron victory is unachievable, but there is a compromise. The small red star satellite that stays extremely close to Mata Nui at all times carries an appreciable portion of resurrection tech, masks, and captives. A large diversion and a specially equipped strike force are able to place the red star into a Necron pocket dimension and then retreat. With the inhabitants and technology of the red star to research, the Necrons make significant headway on the question of soul restoration and the duplication of mask powers. But having taken such an important piece of technology from the Great Spirit, they will attempt to avoid further antagonizing Mata Nui for many millennia to come, for his wrath is now terrible and his enemies are known. But those are just the most likely outcomes that I see playing out. 3 seems the most likely, as the GSR is extraordinarily powerful, but with 2 as the second most likely, since the numbers heavily favor Necrons. And 1 is possible, but would require a level of coordination never before seen in Bionicle. But I do acknowledge that as a very thematically driven universe, unity, duty, and destiny might allow some actual plot armor to manifest and wreck shop. But if you guys enjoy this or think I was way off base character-wise or power-wise, let me know in the comments because I strive for accuracy in both areas. And if Bionicle interests you and you'd like to know more, we have an entire podcast series on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify going over every bit of lore in detail, and we'd love to see you there. But until then, good night, Metro Nui!